The stars glittered like shards of ice against the infinite void as Admiral Raton studied the holographic display of the newly identified planet. His long, slender fingers traced the blue-green orb that spun slowly in projection. Behind him, officers of the Galactic Empire moved with efficient precision across the bridge of the command vessel Inevitable Dawn. "Fascinating," Raton murmured, his voice carrying the aristocratic lilt common to the Empire's upper echelons. "A world that nearly destroyed itself, yet manages to cling to life." His second-in-command, Commander Vex, stepped forward. The natives call it Terra, Admiral. Initial scans show significant population centers, though their distribution is uneven. They appear to have weathered multiple environmental catastrophes in their recent history. Raton's thin lips curved into what passed for a smile among his species. "And their defensive capabilities? Primitive, sir. Mostly terrestrial weaponry, some basic orbital satellites. Nothing that could withstand even our Vanguard fleet." The Admiral nodded, satisfaction evident in his posture. The Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, subjugated dozens of species across 3 galactic arms. This Terra would be but another jewel in the crown, another resource pool to feed the insatiable appetite of their expansion. "Prepare the preliminary assault teams," Raton ordered. "Let's give these Terrans a taste of civilization." As officers scurried to comply, Raton gazed at the slowly rotating planet. So small, so vulnerable, so very ripe for conquest. "Another easy harvest," he whispered to himself. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Aiko Rivers wiped sweat from her brow as she adjusted the frequency modulator. The workshop around her hummed with jury-rigged equipment, solar converters, battery banks, and communication arrays that looked more like abstract sculptures than technology. Outside, the semi-autonomous zone of New Pacific stretched across what had once been coastal highlands before the sea levels rose. "Any luck with the solar fluctuations?" asked Tomas, her colleague who specialized in renewable power systems. "Almost there," Aiko replied, not looking up from her work. At 28, she had already earned a reputation as one of the zone's most innovative engineers. Her specialty was making maximum use of minimal resources, a survival skill in a world where traditional energy infrastructure had become unreliable at best. The equipment before her suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. Aiko frowned, adjusting dials. This wasn't the solar fluctuation she'd been tracking. "That's strange," she muttered. The signal strengthened, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm that made the hair on her arms stand up. This wasn't Earth-made. The pattern was too precise, too alien. "Tomas," she called, her voice tight. "I think you need to see this." Her colleague looked over her shoulder at the oscillating waveform. Some kind of interference? Military testing something new? Aiko shook her head slowly. "This isn't one of ours. The signal's coming from high orbit, and it's not matching any satellite pattern I've ever seen." She quickly began recording the transmission, her heart pounding. For years, conspiracy theorists had claimed that Earth wasn't alone, that observers from beyond the stars were watching humanity's struggle to survive its self-inflicted wounds. Aiko had always dismissed such talk. Now she wasn't so sure. "We should alert the Zone Council," she suggested, but Tomas laughed. "And tell them what? That aliens are coming? They'll think we've been drinking J.O.'s homebrew again." Before Aiko could argue further, their communications equipment went dead. Then the lights. Then every electronic device in the workshop. Outside, people began shouting in confusion and alarm. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. High above Terra, the Empire's advanced ships systematically disabled the planet's primitive satellite network. Electronic countermeasures flooded every frequency, rendering most of the world's communication systems useless within minutes. "First phase complete, Admiral," reported the tactical officer. "The natives have effectively been blinded." Raton nodded his approval. "Deploy the scout force to Grid Sector 8C. Let's see how they respond to a direct demonstration of Imperial authority." 3 assault shuttles detached from the main fleet, descending through Terra's atmosphere toward a coastal population center. Their mission was simple: establish a beachhead, assess resistance capabilities, and prepare for the main invasion force. The Empire had performed this dance hundreds of times before. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The vessels appeared like metallic thunderheads over what had once been called Singapore. Sleek, predatory shapes that moved with impossible grace, they descended upon the sprawling coastal megacity with the confidence of apex predators. When they opened fire, it wasn't to maximize casualties. It was precision work, taking out power. Stations, communication hubs, transportation centers. Strategic paralysis rather than outright slaughter. The landing craft touched down in the central business district, disgorging armored troops who moved with robotic efficiency. Their weapons hummed with energy beyond Terran understanding, and where they pointed, destruction followed. Citizens ran screaming through the streets as strange craft hovered overhead, projecting messages in dozens of languages. Attention! This territory is now under Imperial control. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Compliance will be rewarded. Within hours, the heart of the megacity was secured. Imperial banners flew from the tallest buildings still standing. The first foothold had been established. And throughout Terra, as spotty communications carried word of the attack, the question on everyone's lips was the same. Why us? Why now? And how could anyone possibly stand against such power? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In New Pacific, Ico huddled with other community leaders in the zone's main assembly hall. Emergency generators provided minimal lighting as reports filtered in, strange ships, advanced weapons, and a city fallen in hours. They've taken Singapore, announced Omar, head of communications. And based on scattered reports, they're establishing some kind of command center there. Murmurs of disbelief and fear spread through the room. We need to contact the Unified Nations, someone suggested. With what? Omar replied bitterly. Long-range communications are down. And from what little we've pieced together, major government centers were among the first targets hit. Aiko listened silently, her mind racing. Why would beings advanced enough for interstellar travel want Earth? After decades of environmental crises, resource wars, and demographic collapse, Terra hardly seemed a prize worth crossing the stars to claim. Unless we're a foothold, she said suddenly, drawing all eyes in the room. A strategic location. Earth sits in a relatively unexplored region of the galaxy. If they're expanding their territory, the implication hung heavy in the air. Earth wasn't the target. It was merely a stepping stone. So what do we do? Asked Elise, the elderly head of the agriculture collective. Roll over and die? For a long moment, no one answered. Then, from the back of the room, came a voice Aiko didn't recognize. We fight back. The way we always have. The speaker stepped forward, a weathered woman with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that spoke of hardship overcome. My name is Sanag Reeves, she said, though she offered no title or affiliation. And I think I might know some people who can help. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As dawn broke over Singapore, now designated Acquisition Zone 1, in Imperial records, Admiral Rattan received the first assessment reports from the ground forces. Local resistance has been minimal and disorganized, the field commander reported. Their military forces attempted to respond, but their weapons were largely ineffective against our shields. We've secured a 10-kilometer radius around the landing zone with minimal casualties on our side. Rattan nodded, pleased but not surprised. And the native government? Fragmented. Our intelligence indicates there is no single unified planetary authority. Instead, there are various regional powers, many still recovering from recent conflicts and environmental disasters. This was even better than expected. A divided planet would fall piece by piece, unable to coordinate an effective defense. Excellent. Prepare for Phase 2. I want control of their major power generation facilities and resource extraction points. Once we control their infrastructure, the population will have no choice but to accept our authority. As the commander saluted and disconnected, Rattan turned to survey the tactical display of Terra. The conquest was proceeding exactly according to the standard Imperial playbook. Within weeks, This world would be just another entry in the Empire's vast catalog of subjugated planets. He allowed himself a moment of pride. Another successful acquisition for his record. Perhaps this would finally earn him the promotion to Grand Admiral he'd been seeking. Little did he know that across Terra, the first sparks of resistance unlike any the Empire had faced before were already being kindled. In rural villages where power grids had never reached. In urban slums where self-sufficiency had become a way of life. In hidden bunkers and forgotten facilities. Terra was awakening to the threat, and it was preparing to respond. The blackouts that crippled urban centers had little effect on communities that had long ago learned to live off-grid. When centralized communications failed, old technologies, ham radios, mesh networks, even signal fires and courier systems took their place. In New Pacific, Aiko and her engineering team worked feverishly to establish a makeshift communication network using repurposed equipment. If we can't use the main frequencies, we go low-tech, she explained, showing others how to modify old radio sets. Short-range transmissions, frequency hopping, coded messages, just like resistance movements used centuries ago. Meanwhile, the mysterious Sanaa Greaves had disappeared as quickly as she'd arrived, leaving only a cryptic message. Be ready. You'll know when it's time. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Admiral Rattan observed the holographic map with satisfaction as Imperial forces systematically expanded their control. Red markers indicated secured locations, primarily energy infrastructure, transportation hubs, and resource deposits. Operation Black Shroud is proceeding on schedule, Commander Vex reported. We've established forward bases in 5 strategic locations. Local resistance has been minimal. As expected, Rattan replied, studying the display. Their society was already fracturing before our arrival. No central leadership, wasting energy on internal conflicts. They can hardly mount an organized defense against a superior force. Indeed, sir. At this rate, we should have control of all major infrastructure within 14 standard cycles. After that, population centers will capitulate from necessity alone. Rattan nodded, pleased. Quick victory, minimal Imperial casualties, and a new resource-rich world to exploit. His superiors would be most satisfied. Begin construction of the permanent command center, he ordered. I want our presence on Terra to be unmistakable. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Empire's confidence proved premature. Their first taste of genuine resistance came in what had once been Brazil, where Imperial forces moved to secure a major hydroelectric facility. As the troops approached in their standard formation, a swarm of modified agricultural drones suddenly rose from the surrounding forest canopy. The small machines weren't designed as weapons. They were crop dusters, seed planters, and monitoring devices repurposed by desperate hands. But their numbers were overwhelming, and they had been loaded with improvised explosives. The Imperial soldiers' energy shields, calibrated for high-power weapons, barely registered the small impacts, until the cumulative damage began to take its toll. By the time the assault force retreated, they had lost 3 hover tanks and 24 troops. The facility remained in Terran hands. Similar incidents began occurring across the globe. In Eastern Europe, Imperial transports found roads mysteriously collapsed beneath them, sending valuable equipment into prepositioned traps. In North Africa, solar farms thought to be abandoned suddenly supercharged, creating electromagnetic pulses that fried Imperial electronics. In the ruins of what had once been Tokyo, a squad of elite Imperial shock troops walked into an ambush involving home-brewed thermite and repurposed industrial machinery. None of these actions were coordinated by any central command. There were no generals issuing orders, no war rooms planning strategy. It was organic resistance. People defending their homes with whatever tools came to hand, sharing successful tactics through improvised communication networks. And it was far more effective than the Empire had anticipated. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Attention, people of Terra. The voice crackled through jury-rigged speakers and handheld radios across continents, transmitted through a patchwork network of forgotten satellites and repurposed transmitters. This is not a message of surrender. This is a promise. Every Terran is now a soldier. Every home is a fortress. Every tool is a weapon. We do not need armies to resist. We have survived our own self-inflicted apocalypses. We will survive this invasion. No one knew who had sent the message. It was repeated in dozens of languages, spreading hope and resolve to communities that might otherwise have believed they stood alone. In New Pacific, Aiko listened with growing determination. Her team had expanded, incorporating hackers, communication specialists, and engineers from neighboring zones. Together, they had established a rudimentary intelligence network, collecting and disseminating information about Imperial movements and vulnerabilities. They're strong, she told her growing circle of resistance fighters, but they're predictable. They follow patterns. They expect us to behave like their previous conquests. And we won't, finished Tomas, who had transformed from skeptic to stalwart ally. No, Aiko agreed with a fierce smile. We most certainly will not. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In his command center orbiting Terra, Admiral Raton was beginning to feel the first twinges of concern. Explain to me, he said with dangerous calm, how we've lost 3 supply convoys in the past cycle alone. Commander Vex shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the natives are employing unconventional tactics. They don't engage directly. They strike and vanish. They use the terrain, which they know intimately, against us. These are primitives. Raton snapped. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their society is in ruins. How are they coordinating these attacks? That's just it, sir, Vex replied hesitantly. They don't seem to be coordinating in any way we can detect. There's no command structure to target, no communications network to monitor. Each resistance cell operates independently, but with similar effectiveness. Raton's expression darkened. Increase the pressure. Implement full-spectrum countermeasures. I want their resistance crushed within the next cycle. As the commander hurried to comply, Raton turned back to the planetary display. Something wasn't right here. Terra should have been subdued by now, its people cowed by Imperial might. Instead, the resistance was growing stronger by the day. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. While the Empire focused on visible resistance, something far more dangerous was stirring beneath Terra's oceans. In a submerged facility off what had once been called New Zealand, Colonel Sanaa Greaves stood before a gathering of men and women in uniforms bearing no national insignia. The Subsurface Defense Initiative was created after the Resource Wars, she explained, her voice echoing in the cavernous underwater chamber. When it became clear that surface nations might destroy themselves, forward-thinking leaders from several countries pooled resources to create a final line of defense. On massive screens behind her, surveillance footage showed Imperial ships in orbit and ground forces expanding their control across continents. We were built to defend humanity against itself, she continued grimly. Now we face an external threat far beyond what our founders imagined. But we are not unprepared. At her command, the chamber's lighting shifted, illuminating rows of sleek vessels moored in underwater bays, submarines unlike any that had ever patrolled Earth's oceans, incorporating stealth technologies and weapon systems developed in absolute secrecy. For decades, we've monitored signals from deep space. We knew we weren't alone. We hoped for peaceful contact, but we prepared for the alternative. Her eyes swept across the assembled officers. That day has come. Operation Undertow is now active. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Empire's Black Shroud operation entered its most aggressive phase. Targeted strikes against food production and water treatment facilities designed to force civilian populations into dependence on Imperial supplies. It was a tactic that had broken resistance on countless worlds before. But as Imperial warships moved into position near coastal targets, something unprecedented occurred. Without warning, vessels simply disappeared. One moment, the heavy cruiser Inevitable Justice was patrolling Terra's eastern ocean. The next, it was gone. Communication cut, transponder silent. Before the Imperial fleet could respond, 2 more ships vanished from tactical displays. Deep beneath the waves, Terran stealth submarines, their hulls coated with radar-absorbing materials, struck with precision, using concentrated electromagnetic pulses to disable the warship's systems before launching kinetic penetrators that breached their hulls. For the first time since the invasion began, Imperial forces found themselves on the defensive. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Aiko's journey to the underwater base began with a cryptic message delivered by a teenager on a salvage bicycle. Coordinates and a time, nothing more. She arrived at the coastal rendezvous point to find a small submersible waiting. The craft took her deep beneath the ocean's surface, through hidden passages, to emerge finally in a massive undersea complex that defied belief. "Welcome to Sanctuary Deep," said Colonel Greaves, greeting her as she stepped from the submersible, still dripping seawater. One of 13 such facilities around the world. Aiko stared in speechless wonder at the technology surrounding her, advanced beyond anything she'd seen before, yet distinctly human in design. How is this possible?" she finally managed to ask. "The resources required. Hidden in plain sight," Greaves explained as she led Aiko through corridors bustling with uniformed personnel, military budgets that vanished into black projects, research grants that produced no public results. For decades, the Subsurface Defense Initiative has operated in absolute secrecy, preparing for humanity's darkest hour. They entered a laboratory where engineers worked on what appeared to be hybrid technology, human designs incorporating elements that were distinctly alien. In 2093, a small scout ship crashed in the South Indian Ocean, Greaves explained. "We recovered it before anyone else could reach the site. The occupants were dead, but their technology, it gave us a quantum leap forward." Aiko ran her hand over a component that seemed to hum with inner life. "You reversed engineered alien tech." "As best we could," Greaves confirmed. "We've had 30 years. Not enough to match the Empire's capabilities, but enough to give us a fighting chance." She turned to face Aiko directly. "Your resistance network has proven invaluable. But now we need to coordinate our efforts. The Empire believes they're fighting scattered insurgents. They have no idea what's really waiting for them." Aiko felt a surge of hope for the first time since the invasion began. Terra isn't as defenseless as they thought. "No," agreed Greaves with a cold smile. "We most certainly are not." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Admiral Ratan's mood had turned from concern to barely controlled fury as reports of naval losses poured in. "Impossible," he snarled, smashing a fist against the tactical display. "Their technological level does not support these capabilities." "The evidence suggests otherwise, Admiral," Commander Vex replied carefully. "Our ships are being targeted with remarkable precision by vessels we cannot detect until they attack." Ratan paced the command center, his mind racing. This was no longer a simple pacification operation. Terra was proving to be a far more complex target than intelligence had indicated. "Deploy our reserve forces," he ordered. "I want planetary orbital superiority established immediately. And prepare the Sun Lance." Vex paled visibly. "Sir, the Sun Lance is a planetary siege weapon. Its use on inhabited worlds requires authorization from." "I'm aware of protocol, Commander," Ratan snapped. "But I will not allow this primitive world to make a mockery of Imperial power. Prepare the weapon." "That's an order." As the subordinates rushed to comply, a troubling thought began to circulate among the Imperial officers. If these were merely Terra's hidden defensive measures, what might their actual military forces be capable of? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The alliance between the surface resistance and the submarine forces transformed the conflict. With coordinated intelligence and combined resources, Terran fighters began targeting Imperial supply lines, communications relays, and forward operating bases. Ships that once freely bombarded coastal targets now moved cautiously, knowing that stealth predators lurked beneath the waves. Ground forces that had advanced with impunity found their support structures crumbling behind them. In New Pacific, Aiko had become the nexus of a sprawling intelligence network. Her engineering expertise helped interpret Imperial technology, captured in skirmishes, identifying weaknesses that could be exploited. They rely too heavily on centralized systems, she explained to resistance leaders gathered around salvaged Imperial equipment. Their individual soldiers are formidable, but they depend on continuous strategic direction. Disrupt their command structure, and they become vulnerable. The resistance put this insight to devastating effect. Rather than engaging Imperial troops directly, they targeted communication arrays, sensor networks, and command vehicles. Without clear orders, the invaders' superior firepower became increasingly ineffective against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Colonel Greaves entered the strategy room at Sanctuary Deep with grim news. Our orbital assets have detected a new weapon being assembled in high Terra orbit, she announced to her command staff and Aiko, who had become a key advisor. Based on its configuration and energy signature, we believe it's a directed energy platform capable of targeting surface installations from space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They're getting desperate, Aiko observed. They expected an easy conquest, and we've bloodied their nose. Perhaps, Greaves agreed, but a wounded beast is most dangerous when cornered. If they deploy this weapon, our analysts are calling it Sun Lance based on intercepted communications, we could lose millions of lives in the first strike alone. She activated a holographic display showing the orbital weapon's predicted capability, a swath of destruction capable of reducing entire cities to ash. We can't allow it to become operational, Greaves continued, which means we need to take the fight beyond our atmosphere. Aiko leaned forward, studying the projection. You have spacecraft? Instead of answering directly, Greaves touched another control. The wall of the strategy room slid open, revealing a vast underground hangar. Within it stood a collection of sleek vessels that resembled no conventional aircraft Aiko had ever seen. The Artemis program, Greaves explained, originally designed as evacuation ships if Terra became uninhabitable, modified with technology recovered from the crashed alien vessel. We have 12 operational craft, capable of reaching orbit and engaging in space combat. Aiko stared at the ships, their hulls gleaming under harsh lights. They're beautiful, she whispered. They're untested in actual combat, Greaves cautioned, and we have limited qualified pilots. This will be a high-risk operation with minimal margin for error. I want to go, Aiko said suddenly, surprising herself as much as everyone in the room. Greaves raised an eyebrow. You're an engineer, not a soldier. Exactly, Aiko replied, her resolve strengthening. If something goes wrong with the ships up there, you'll need someone who understands both our technology and theirs. I've spent months studying their systems. I might see solutions others would miss. After a long pause, Greaves nodded slowly. Very well, but you'll need crash training in zero-G operations. We launch in 36 hours. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. High above Terra, Admiral Raton watched with satisfaction as the Sun Lance neared completion. The massive orbital platform represented the Empire's ultimate expression of power, a weapon capable of rendering planetary resistance futile with a single demonstration strike. Target coordinates are locked, Admiral, reported the weapons officer. The first strike will neutralize the largest concentration of resistance activity we've detected. Excellent, Raton replied. Once they witness the Sun Lance's power, the natives will understand the futility of continued resistance. Commander Vex approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. Sir, our intelligence division has compiled a disturbing report. There are indications that the Terrans may have orbital capabilities we weren't aware of. Raton scoffed. Impossible. Our surveys showed no significant space presence. Nevertheless, sir, several automated sensor platforms have detected anomalous energy signatures consistent with launch preparations. For the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed Raton's features. Increase the Sun Lance's defensive screen and dispatch our remaining fighters to establish a perimeter. As the commander hurried away, Raton turned his gaze toward the blue-green planet below. What other surprises did this world hold? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Artemis vessels rose from hidden launch facilities across Terra, from beneath mountain ranges, from underwater bays, from camouflaged desert installations. Their ascent was stealthy, using minimal power until they clear the atmosphere, presenting the smallest possible sensor profile. Inside the lead ship, Artemis Actual, Aiko struggled to control her nausea as the craft accelerated beyond anything she had experienced before. Beside her, Colonel Greaves and a small strike team of SDI's most elite operators prepared for boarding action. "Remember your training," Greaves told them as they watched Terra shrink beneath them. "The Empire's technology is advanced, but not infallible. Their arrogance is their weakness. They won't expect an attack from a species they consider primitive." As they approached orbital altitude, the vastness of the Imperial presence became apparent. Dozens of warships surrounded the massive Sun Lance platform, a crystalline structure that seemed to focus the very light of the sun itself. "Receiving targeting data," announced the pilot. "They're preparing to fire. All units engage," ordered Greaves. "Phoenix Protocol authorized." The Artemis fleet broke formation, each vessel selecting pre-assigned targets. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had surprise and desperation on their side. And they had one other advantage the Empire couldn't anticipate: hybrid technology combining human ingenuity with reverse-engineered alien systems that operated on principles the Empire didn't expect from primitives. The battle erupted in silence against the backdrop of stars. Imperial fighters scrambled to intercept the unknown craft, but the Artemis vessels were more agile than anything the Empire had encountered before, weaving through defensive fire to strike at critical systems. Artemis Actual drove straight for the Sun Lance platform, its objective clear: disable the weapon before it could target Terra's surface. "Approaching insertion point," announced the pilot as they skimmed the massive structure's surface, avoiding defensive fire by staying in the weapon's blind spots. "Boarding team, prepare for zero-G transition," ordered Greaves. Aiko checked her suit's seals one final time, heart hammering in her chest. The engineer in her marveled at the Sun Lance's construction, even as the human in her recoiled at its purpose. With a metallic thunk, Artemis Actual attached itself to the platform's outer hull. Cutting torches flared as they created their own entrance. "Breach successful," reported the team leader. "Moving in." Asterisk. Admiral Raton watched in disbelief as the tactical display showed Terran vessels engaging his fleet with inexplicable effectiveness. "This is impossible," he whispered, then louder. "This is impossible. Where do they get these ships? How are they penetrating our defenses?" "Sir," interrupted a communications officer, "we've lost contact with sections 3 through 7 of the Sun Lance. Internal sensors indicate a breach." Raton's composure finally shattered. "They're boarding us. Primitives are boarding an Imperial weapons platform." "Confirmed, sir. Security teams are responding, but the intruders are moving with unexpected coordination." The Admiral's mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. Terra was supposed to be an easy conquest, a stepping stone for further expansion. Instead, his fleet was engaged in pitched battle with ships that shouldn't exist, and his superweapon was under attack from within. "Divert all available forces to protect the Sun Lance," he ordered. "It must fire as planned. The natives must learn the cost of defiance." Asterisk. Inside the Sun Lance, Aiko followed the strike team through gleaming corridors that thrummed with barely contained energy. Imperial defenders appeared at intersections, their energy weapons flashing in the confined space, but the Terran team moved with practiced precision, using specialized weapons designed to overload Imperial shield systems. "This way," directed Greaves, consulting a schematic developed from analyzed Imperial technology. "The main control node should be ahead." They fought their way forward, suffering casualties but advancing steadily toward the platform's core. When they finally breached the central control chamber, they found themselves in a vast spherical room dominated by a pulsing crystalline structure. "That's the focusing array," Aiko realized, immediately grasping the weapon's operating principle. It channels energy from these conduits into a coherent beam. "Can you disable it?" asked Greaves as the team secured the chamber, setting up defensive positions against the inevitable counterattack. Aiko approached the control interfaces cautiously. "Their systems are more advanced, but the principles are similar to what we've studied. I need time. Time is something we don't have," Greaves replied grimly as alarms began to sound throughout the platform. "They're initiating the firing sequence remotely." The crystalline array began to glow with increasing intensity, the air itself seeming to warp around it. Aiko worked frantically at the alien controls, trying to interrupt the process. But the system rejected her commands, recognizing her as an unauthorized user. "I can't override it directly," she admitted, sweat beading inside her helmet. "But maybe—" She reached into her equipment pack and removed a small device, an electromagnetic pulse generator of her own design, incorporating elements of Imperial technology salvaged from crashed ships. "If I can't shut it down through software, we go with hardware." As Imperial troops began to breach their defensive perimeter, Aiko attached her device directly to the crystalline array's power distribution node. The hybrid technology interfaced with the Imperial systems in ways pure human tech never could, uploading a virus designed to corrupt the weapon's targeting systems. "Everyone out now," she shouted, setting the EMP device's timer. "This whole section is going to overload." The strike team fought their way back toward their entry point, carrying wounded comrades as the sun lance began to shake violently around them. Behind them, the central chamber erupted in cascading energy discharges as Aiko's virus forced the weapon to consume its own power source. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. From the command ship, Admiral Rattan watched in horror as the sun lance, the Empire's most fearsome weapon and his last hope for salvaging the invasion, began to break apart. Explosions rippled along its surface as power systems overloaded, turning the magnificent weapon into an expanding cloud of debris. "No," he whispered, then shouted to his communications officer, "Send emergency transmission to Imperial Central Command. We need reinforcements immediately." He dictated the message himself, his voice shaking with uncharacteristic emotion. "Terror resistance far exceeds initial assessment. Unexpected space capabilities. Sun lance destroyed. Request immediate reinforcement. We may have grievously underestimated this species." As the message was transmitted across vast interstellar distances, Rattan stared at the tactical display, where Imperial ships were being systematically disabled or destroyed by the smaller, but surprisingly effective Terran vessels. A terrible realization dawned on him. In all the Empire's long history of conquest, they had never failed to subjugate a target world. Until now. "Sir," Commander Vex approached cautiously, "our remaining ships are requesting permission to withdraw to defensive positions." Rattan nodded numbly. "Granted. Regroup at the outer system boundary." As the commander moved to relay the orders, Rattan continued to stare at the blue-green world that had so thoroughly upended his expectations. "Ow!" he murmured to himself. "How do we not see this coming?" Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Artemis Actual limped back to Terra with battle damage and fewer crew than it had launched with, but its mission was accomplished. As they re-entered atmosphere, Aiko watched through a viewport as the Sunlance's destruction lit up the night sky like a new constellation, a visible symbol of hope for people across the planet. At Sanctuary Deep, the returning strike team was greeted with subdued celebration. They had won a critical victory, but at significant cost, and all knew the war was far from over. "What happens now?" Aiko asked Colonel Greaves as medical teams tended to the wounded. "Now we press our advantage," Greaves replied, her expression grim but determined. "The Empire will regroup, but they're off balance. For the first time, they're afraid." "You want to take the fight to them?" Aiko realized. Greaves nodded. "Their supply chain runs through the Vorin star system, a staging area for their expansion into this sector of space. If we could disrupt it, we might force them to abandon the invasion altogether," Aiko finished. But as plans were made for this unprecedented offensive, debate raged across Terra's resistance networks. Many argued that they should focus on securing their home world rather than risking their limited resources on an interstellar strike. "We've bloodied their nose," went one argument. "Let's fortify and prepare for their return, not overextend ourselves." Others countered, "If we give them time to recover, they'll return with an overwhelming force. We must strike while they're vulnerable." The discussion reached every corner of the resistance, from the underwater bases to the guerrilla camps in former cities. It was a fundamental question of strategy that revealed deeper philosophical divides among Terra's defenders. In the end, the decision came down to a simple, brutal calculus. The Empire would not stop with Terra. If humanity survived only to watch as other worlds fell to Imperial conquest, what kind of victory would that be? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Admiral Rattan faced the holographic projection of the Imperial High Command with as much dignity as he could muster. "The natives have capabilities far beyond what our intelligence suggested," he explained, struggling to maintain his composure. "Their resistance is not merely stubborn. It is sophisticated, adaptive, and employs technologies we believe beyond their reach." The imposing figure of Grand Marshal Voss, supreme military commander of the Empire, regarded him coldly. "You were given ample resources for this conquest, Admiral. A standard pacification fleet should have been more than sufficient for a pre-interstellar civilization." "With respect, Grand Marshal, there is nothing standard about this world," Rattan countered. "They had hidden reserves we could not have anticipated. Underwater bases, orbital capabilities disguised from our scans, hybrid technology that appears to incorporate principles similar to our own." "Impossible," declared another council member. "They've never ventured beyond their own solar system. How could they possess such technology?" Rattan hesitated before answering. "We believe they may have recovered and reverse-engineered technology from a crashed Imperial scout ship." Shocked murmurs rippled through the high command. "The natives call themselves Terrans," Rattan continued, "and they fight unlike any species we've encountered. They have no central command structure for us to target, no unified military for us to defeat. Each region, each community seems capable of organizing its own resistance, using whatever resources are at hand." Grand Marshal Voss leaned forward, his expression grave. "What exactly are you requesting, Admiral?" "Reinforcements. A full battle group, at minimum. With sufficient force, we can still bring this world to heel." After a long pause, Voss nodded. "Your request is granted. The 7th Imperial Battle Group will divert to your position. They will arrive within 14 cycles. Until then, consolidate your forces. Minimize engagement with the natives. Preserve your remaining strength." As the transmission ended, Rattan exhaled slowly. He had been granted a reprieve, but he knew his career likely wouldn't survive this campaign. The Empire did not look kindly on commanders who underestimated their opponents. "Commander Vex," he called, "prepare to withdraw our ground forces from exposed positions. Establish defensive perimeters around our remaining secure zones. We will weather the storm until reinforcements arrive." As his orders were relayed, Rattan turned once more to the view screen, showing Terra rotating serenely below. Such a deceptively peaceful appearance for a world that had become his personal nightmare. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Terran offensive against the Voran system was unprecedented in human history, the first interstellar military operation ever launched by Earth forces. 5 Artemis vessels, including Colonel Greaves' flagship and Ico's engineering expertise, comprised the strike team. The plan was audacious, perhaps suicidally so. They would use captured Imperial navigation data to plot a course to Voran, then strike at the supply chain that supported the invasion fleet, not to destroy it entirely. That would be impossible with their limited forces, but to disrupt it sufficiently to force the Empire to reconsider the value of conquering Terra. As the ships accelerated beyond Terra's solar system, utilizing propulsion systems that merged human innovation with recovered alien technology, Ico found herself standing in the observation deck of Artemis Actual, watching her home world shrink to a pale blue dot. "First humans to leave the solar system," remarked Colonel Greaves, joining her at the viewport. Not exactly how our scientists imagined this milestone. Aiko nodded silently, the enormity of their journey settling over her. For all of human history, mankind had gazed at the stars and wondered what lay beyond. Now she was among the first to find out, driven not by exploration, but by desperate necessity. "Do you think we can succeed?" she asked finally. Greaves considered the question carefully before answering. "The Empire doesn't expect us to strike beyond our own world. Surprise gave us the edge in orbital combat. It may serve us again." She paused. "But make no mistake, this is a raid, not an invasion. We hit them hard and fast, then retreat before they can bring their full might against us." The journey to Vorin took days of accelerated travel through the void between stars. The Artemis fleet maintained communication silence, moving along trajectories calculated to minimize the chance of early detection. When they finally arrive at the edge of the Vorin system, the scope of the Imperial presence took their breath away. Dozens of warships orbited a rocky, industrialized world. Massive space stations served as shipyards and supply depots. Transport vessels moved in organized patterns between facilities. "That's a lot more than we expected," admitted the tactical officer, studying the sensor readings. "Focus on the primary targets," Greaves ordered calmly. "The fuel processing station and the communications array. If we can disrupt their supply chain and isolate them from Imperial command, it will force them to delay reinforcements to Terra." The Artemis vessels powered up their weapons systems and activated their engines, accelerating toward the unsuspecting Imperial facilities. For Terra, someone whispered over the comm channel as they committed to their attack run. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Deep within the Imperial Palace on the capital world of Nexus Prime, Emperor Zorn VI received the disturbing report from the Terran campaign with growing concern. "You mean to tell me," he said to his chief intelligence officer, "that a pre-interstellar species has not only resisted our standard conquest protocol, but has actually inflicted significant losses on our forces? The situation is unprecedented, Your Luminance," replied the intelligence officer. "Admiral Rattan believes they may have salvaged technology from one of our lost scout vessels." "One ship?" the Emperor questioned incredulously. "They reverse-engineered space-faring technology from a single crashed vessel." "It appears so, Your Luminance. What's more troubling is their method of resistance. Unlike most worlds we conquer, Terra has no single authority we can pressure into surrender. Their political structures are fragmented, their military forces decentralized. Each region seems capable of mounting independent resistance." The Emperor leaned back on his crystalline throne, contemplating this information. In thousands of years of Imperial expansion, no world had ever repelled the initial conquest force. It was disturbing. "The 7th Battle Group has been dispatched to reinforce Admiral Rattan," continued the intelligence officer. "With those additional resources, the planet should be subdued within acceptable timeframes." "See that it is," the Emperor replied dismissively. "We cannot allow word to spread that a primitive world successfully resisted Imperial might. It would encourage dissent in our newer territories." As the intelligence officer bowed and retreated, the Emperor turned to his personal strategic advisor, who had remained silent during the exchange. "Your thoughts, Strategist Kell?" The aged advisor stroked his chin thoughtfully. "If these Terrans can adapt our technology so quickly and fight so effectively without central coordination, they could prove more valuable as allies than as subjects." The Emperor waved away the suggestion. "The Empire does not make allies of primitives. They will be conquered like all others. It is merely a matter of applying sufficient force." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Artemis fleet struck the Vorin system with precision and ferocity that belied their limited numbers. Using the hybrid technology that made their ships partially compatible with Imperial systems, they managed to bypass several layers of automated defenses before the alarm was raised. Artemis Actual led the attack on the massive fuel processing station, launching specialized missiles. Designed to target specific vulnerabilities in Imperial architecture that Aiko and her team had identified from salvage data. The explosions bloomed silently in space, beautiful and terrible as the station's outer sections began to break apart. Meanwhile, the other Artemis vessels focused on the communications array, severing the Voron system's real-time connection to Imperial Command. First objectives achieved, reported the tactical officer. Enemy vessels mobilizing to intercept. Colonel Greaves nodded grimly. Commence Phase 2. Target their transport vessels and supply depots. The Terran ships accelerated again, weaving through the growing storm of Imperial defensive fire. They were outnumbered 10-1, but their smaller, more agile vessels utilized hit-and-run tactics that frustrated Imperial gunners. On the engineering deck, ICO worked frantically to maintain the hybrid systems that gave them their edge. The technology was temperamental, prone to unexpected interactions between human and alien components. "Power fluctuation in the main drive," shouted a technician as warning lights flashed across his console. Aiko rushed to the affected system, her hands flying over the controls. Rerouting through secondary conduits. Hold course. Through the ship's internal camera feeds, she could see the battle raging outside. Imperial warships turning ponderously to engage the Terran interlopers, transport vessels scattering in disarray, more explosions marking successful strikes against supply facilities. They were actually succeeding. A handful of ships from a supposedly primitive world wreaking havoc in the heart of an Imperial stronghold. And then everything changed. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, called the sensor operator, panic evident in his voice. Large vessels incoming. Colonel Greaves' expression hardened. The reinforcements weren't supposed to arrive for days. On the tactical display, new Imperial warships materialized, massive, heavily armed vessels that dwarfed even the largest ships already in the system. All vessels abort mission. Greaves ordered immediately. Execute emergency withdrawal pattern. Get clear of the gravity well and prepare for maximum acceleration on heading Epsilon 9. Artemis actual shuddered as it took a glancing hit from an Imperial cruiser. Damage reports flooded in from multiple decks. "We've lost Artemis 3, reported communications. Direct hit. No survivors." Aiko felt a chill run through her. They had known this mission carried extreme risk, but the reality of losing an entire ship, dozens of lives, hit hard. The remaining Artemis vessels fought desperately to break free of the Imperial encirclement, using every evasive maneuver and countermeasure at their disposal. Two more took critical damage before they managed to clear the engagement zone. Only Artemis Actual and one other ship escaped the Voron system at full speed, accelerating away from the pursuit vessels until they could activate their long-range drives for the journey back to Terra. In the aftermath, as damage control teams worked to stabilize critical systems, Aiko found Colonel Greaves in the strategic planning room, staring at the mission assessment. "Was it worth it?" Aiko asked quietly. Greaves didn't look up. "We destroyed 60% of their fuel reserves, disabled their primary communications array, and damaged at least a dozen transport vessels. The reinforcements to Terra will be delayed by weeks, maybe months. But at what cost? Too high," Greaves admitted, finally meeting Aiko's gaze. "Far too high, but it bought Terra time. Time to prepare for what's coming." Aiko nodded silently. They both knew that the Empire's response, when it finally came, would be overwhelming. The question was whether Terra could possibly withstand it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the Imperial flagship newly arrived at Voron, Grand Admiral Thorne surveyed the damage with cold fury. "This is beyond comprehension," he stated flatly. "A pre-interstellar species penetrated our defenses, caused this level of destruction, and escaped." The system commander stood rigidly at attention, clearly terrified. "They employed unconventional tactics, sir. Their vessels utilized technology similar to our own, but configured in ways our defensive systems didn't recognize as threats until too late. And now they've returned to their homeworld with knowledge of a successful strike against an Imperial stronghold," Thorne concluded. "Do you understand the precedent this sets? The potential for inspiration among other subjugated worlds." "Yes, Grand Admiral." Thorne turned to his senior staff. The timetable has accelerated. We will not wait for full repairs to the supply chain. The Terra situation must be resolved immediately with overwhelming force. Sir, ventured his tactical officer. Preliminary analysis suggests these Terrans will continue to resist convention methods. Perhaps a different approach. They will break like all the others, Thorne interrupted coldly. No species has ever withstood the full might of an Imperial battle group. Dispatch scout vessels ahead of the main fleet. I want updated intelligence on their defenses before we arrive. As the officers dispersed to carry out his orders, Thorne remained at the viewport, contemplating the damaged facilities floating in space before him. These primitives had shown remarkable ingenuity and courage. In another context, he might have admired such qualities. But the Empire could not tolerate defiance. Terra would be made an example to all who might consider resistance. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The mood across Terra was complicated when the two surviving Artemis vessels returned. There was pride in what they had accomplished. The first human strike beyond a solar system, a successful raid against the seemingly invincible Empire. But there was also grief for those lost and growing fear about the inevitable Imperial response. In New Pacific, now a major hub of the resistance, Aiko addressed a council of leaders from various regions. The raid bought us time, she explained, but the Empire will return with greater numbers and a personal grudge. We need to prepare on a scale we haven't attempted before. What are you proposing? Asked Omar, who had become a key coordinator for the Resistance Network. Aiko activated a holographic display showing designs she and other engineers had developed. We take everything we've learned about Imperial technology and incorporate it into our defenses. Not just our military assets, but civilian infrastructure too. The designs showed urban areas with shield generators, transportation networks that could quickly be repurposed for evacuation or troop movement, communications systems hardened against Imperial jamming techniques. This isn't just about surviving the next attack, she continued passionately. It's about establishing that Terra is simply too costly to conquer. If we can make the price of victory unacceptably high, the Empire might be forced to reconsider, or they might decide to simply destroy us from orbit, countered another council member grimly. Colonel Greaves, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. That's not their way. The Empire conquers to exploit, not to annihilate. They want our resources, our labor. If they can't have those, they'll eventually move on to easier targets. The debate continued for hours, but ultimately Aiko's proposal was adopted. Across Terra, communities began incorporating Imperial-derived technology into their defense preparations. The underwater bases increased production of hybrid weapons and shields. The remaining Artemis vessels were repaired and additional craft constructed from salvaged Imperial materials. Terra would not go quietly into subjugation. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 3 months after the raid on Vorin, Imperial scouts appeared in Terra's solar system, stealthy vessels designed for reconnaissance rather than combat. They maintained their distance, observing the planet and its newly established defenses. What they saw would have been unimaginable before the invasion. A formerly fractious world united in common defense, primitive technology hybridized with salvaged Imperial systems, and a population prepared to resist with every resource at their disposal. When the scouts transmitted their findings back to Grand Admiral Thorne, the response was immediate: accelerate the timetable. The full battle group would arrive within days. On Terra, the detection of the scout vessels triggered final preparations. This would be the moment that determined humanity's fate, whether they would remain free or fall under the yoke of an interstellar empire. In Sanctuary Deep, Colonel Greaves addressed the combined leadership of Terra's defense forces. The time for preparation is over, she announced solemnly. Our long-range sensors have detected a massive Imperial fleet approaching. This will be their full strength, far beyond what we faced before. The assembled commanders absorbed this news with grim determination. They had known this day would come. We've distributed our defensive capabilities as widely as possible, Greaves continued. No single strike can cripple us. Our strategy remains unchanged. Make every kilometer of territory they take cost them dearly. Show them that even if they win, the price will be too high to bear. As the meeting concluded, Aiko found herself standing alone with Greaves in the command center. "Do you think we can actually win?" she asked quietly. Greaves considered the question carefully. "Define win. Will we destroy the Imperial battle group?" "No. But can we convince them that Terra isn't worth the continued investment of resources?" She nodded slowly. "That we might achieve. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk." The Imperial battle group arrived with overwhelming force. Dozens of capital ships, hundreds of support vessels, and thousands of troops prepared for planetary assault. It was the largest military force ever assembled in Terra's solar system, a display of power meant to crush any hope of successful resistance. Grand Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge of his flagship, Imperial Ascendancy, studying the blue-green world that had caused such unexpected trouble. "Begin the attack sequence," he ordered calmly. "Target their orbital defenses first, then establish landing zones at these coordinates." He indicated several strategic locations across Terra's surface. The Imperial fleet moved into position, weapons charging. The battle for Terra had begun in earnest. But the Empire's first salvos revealed something unexpected. The defenses they targeted were decoys, elaborate construct designed to draw fire, while the real defensive platforms remained hidden until the optimal moment to strike. From concealed positions around Terra's orbit, hybrid weapon systems opened fire on the Imperial vanguard. From beneath the ocean's surface, stealth vessels launched precision strikes against vulnerable targets identified from the previous encounters. The Imperial advance faltered as ships began taking damage from unexpected vectors. Thorne's expression darkened as reports of losses flooded in. "These are not the actions of primitives," he growled. "This is a coordinated defense strategy incorporating our own tactical principles." His intelligence officer approached cautiously. "Sir, we've intercepted their communications. They appear to be operating on a distributed command model, multiple independent defense sectors coordinating but not centrally controlled, which means there's no headquarters to target, no leadership to eliminate," Thorne concluded. Clever. He adjusted his strategy accordingly, ordering a more methodical approach. The Empire still held the advantage in raw firepower and numbers. They would grind down Terra's defenses through attrition if necessary. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The battle raged across Terra's orbit and atmosphere for days. Imperial landing craft fought their way through layered defenses to establish beachheads on the surface, only to find themselves engaged by local resistance using hybrid weapons and guerrilla tactics. In New Pacific, Aiko coordinated the defense of the coastal region, utilizing repurposed Imperial technology to track enemy movements and disrupt their communications. When Imperial troops finally breached the outer perimeter, they found themselves fighting house to house against civilians who had transformed everyday tools into effective weapons. From her command post, Aiko watched the tactical display with growing concern. The resistance was exacting a heavy toll on the invaders, but Imperial reinforcements kept arriving. They were being worn down through sheer numbers. "We need to fall back to the secondary positions," she ordered reluctantly. "Trigger the prepared demolitions as we withdraw." As her forces executed a fighting retreat, carefully placed explosives collapsed buildings and infrastructure behind them, channeling the Imperial advance into prepared kill zones where hidden weapon emplacements could inflict maximum casualties. Similar scenes played out across Terra as defenders traded space for time, making the invaders pay for every meter of ground they took. The Empire had expected a swift reconquest. Instead, they found themselves in a protracted, grinding campaign against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. In orbit, the situation was equally challenging. The Imperial fleet had superior numbers, but the Terran defenders employed hit-and-run tactics that negated much of that advantage. Artemis vessels would strike quickly at vulnerable targets, then retreat before overwhelming force could be brought to bear. After a week of relentless combat, Grand Admiral Thorne called a strategy conference with his senior commanders. This campaign is not proceeding as expected, he acknowledged, studying the holographic battle map. Our casualties are 20% above projections, and we've secured less than 15% of strategic targets. The natives fight differently than anticipated, offered as ground forces commander. They don't attempt to hold territory or engage in conventional battles. They strike, withdraw, and strike again. My troops are exhausted from constant vigilance. More concerning, added the intelligence officer, is their use of our own technology against us. They've adapted remarkably quickly, incorporating salvage systems into their defenses in ways our doctrine doesn't account for. Thorne absorbed these reports silently. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds, but none had resisted like this, with such tenacity, creativity, and distributed resilience. If we continue with conventional conquest protocols, how long until we achieve planetary pacification? He asked finally. The intelligence officer hesitated. Current projections suggest 6 to 8 months, with casualties potentially reaching 40% of deployed forces. An uncomfortable silence fell over the command staff. Such losses would be unprecedented in Imperial history. And even if they eventually succeeded, maintaining control over such a stubbornly resistant population would require a permanent occupation force of considerable size. There is another option, suggested the strategic officer cautiously. We could demonstrate our full destructive capability on an uninhabited region, perhaps one of their polar caps. Show them what awaits if resistance continues. Thorne considered this, then shook his head. If they haven't broken yet, such a demonstration would only harden their resolve. No, we need a more fundamental reassessment. He turned to his communications officer. Prepare a secure channel to Imperial Command. I must consult with the Emperor directly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the ruins of what had once been a coastal city, now a battlefield scarred by weapons beyond human understanding, Ico met with Colonel Greaves to assess their situation. We're holding, but just barely, Ico reported, pulling up data on a portable holographic projector. Our adaptive shield technology has been surprisingly effective against their standard weapons, but they're learning, changing frequencies, adjusting tactics. Greaves nodded grimly. Similar reports from all defense sectors. We're inflicting serious losses, but they keep coming. They've committed fully to this invasion. A communications officer approached urgently. Colonel, we're detecting unusual movement patterns in the Imperial fleet. Multiple capital ships appear to be withdrawing from low orbit. Both women exchanged puzzled glances. This didn't align with any Imperial tactic they had observed or expected. Analysis? Greaves demanded. Unclear, admitted the officer. But long-range sensors show increased activity around their flagship. Something's happening. Hours later, the reason became clear. A transmission on all frequencies, broadcast in perfect Earth languages. Attention, people of Terra. This is Grand Admiral Thorne of the Galactic Imperial Fleet. I am authorized to offer terms for cessation of hostilities. The message repeated across every communication device still functioning on the planet. In New Pacific, in the underwater bases, in resistance strongholds across continents, people gathered around speakers in disbelief. Was the Empire actually proposing peace? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Emperor Zorn VI had not been pleased by Grand Admiral Thorne's assessment. You mean to tell me, he said with dangerous calm, that this pre-interstellar species continues to resist effectively despite our overwhelming force advantage? The situation is unique, your luminance, Thorne replied carefully via holographic projection. The Terrans employ unconventional warfare techniques that negate many of our standard tactical advantages. More concerning is their rate of technological adaptation. They've incorporated salvaged Imperial technology into their defenses at an unprecedented pace. In your recommendation? The Emperor prompted. Thorne took a calculated risk. In negotiated settlement, your luminance, not surrender. They've demonstrated they will not accept subjugation, but a formalized relationship that acknowledges their unusual capabilities while bringing them into the imperial sphere. The Emperor's expression darkened. The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. With respect, Your Luminance, the Terrans have proven they are not primitive in the ways that matter. Their technological base may be less advanced, but their adaptability, creativity, and resolve exceed anything we've encountered before. Thorn paused before playing his final card. And preliminary analysis suggests they may be more valuable as trading partners than as a conquered world. For long moments, the Emperor was silent, weighing options and implications. The Empire's reputation for invincibility was at stake, but so were valuable military resources that could be better employed elsewhere. Finally, he nodded once. You are authorized to negotiate terms, Grand Admiral. But understand this. The outcome must preserve Imperial dignity and advantage. Terra will acknowledge Imperial supremacy, even if we grant them unusual autonomy. Understood, Your Luminance. As the transmission ended, Thorn allowed himself a small smile. In all his centuries of service, he had never faced an adversary like the Terrans. Perhaps that was precisely why they deserved a different fate than standard conquest. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The negotiations took place on neutral ground, an orbital platform constructed specifically for the purpose, incorporating both Imperial and Terran design elements. Colonel Greaves led the Terran delegation, with Iko serving as technical advisor. Grand Admiral Thorn represented the Empire, accompanied by a retinue of senior officers and diplomatic specialists. The discussions were tense, complex, and extended. Over days as both sides maneuvered for advantage. The Empire insisted on acknowledgement of their superior status and technology. The Terrans demanded guarantees of autonomy and protection. Eventually, a framework emerged. Terra would be recognized as a protected independent territory within the Imperial sphere. The planet would maintain self-governance and control over its own resources, while gaining limited access to Imperial technology and trade networks. In exchange, Terra would provide the Empire with certain rare materials and serve as a buffer zone against potential rivals in this sector of space. As the final terms were being formalized, Thorn found himself in a private conversation with Iko. Your species is remarkable, he admitted. In all my years serving the Empire, I've never encountered a world that fought as yours did. Iko studied him carefully. We've had plenty of practice fighting among ourselves. Perhaps that prepared us for external threats in ways more unified species never needed. Perhaps, Thorn agreed. Or perhaps you simply refused to accept that defeat was inevitable. Nothing is inevitable, Iko replied firmly. That's something humanity learned through hard experience. Thorn nodded thoughtfully. A lesson the Empire may need to consider as well. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When the treaty was finally signed, reactions across Terra were mixed. Many celebrated avoiding total war and potentially gaining access to advanced technology. Others worried about the long-term implications of any relationship with an empire known for conquest. In New Pacific, now being rebuilt after the fighting, Iko stood with Colonel Greaves watching the sunset over the ocean. Do you think they'll honor the agreement? Iko asked quietly. For now, Greaves replied. We've made ourselves too costly to conquer, and they have other priorities elsewhere in the galaxy. She turned to face Iko directly. But make no mistake, this isn't over. The Empire doesn't forget or forgive easily. They'll be watching us, waiting for any sign of weakness. Iko nodded, understanding the implicit message. Terra's independence would require constant vigilance and continued innovation. They had earned a reprieve, not a permanent peace. What happens now, she asked. Now, Greaves said with a determined smile, we prepare. We learn everything we can from their technology. We strengthen our defenses. We establish contact with other species who might share a perspective on Imperial rule. You think there are others out there? Potential allies? The Empire didn't become this large by conquering empty planets. There must be thousands of subjugated worlds, many probably watching what happened here with great interest. Greaves gazed up at the darkening sky, where stars were beginning to appear. We may have done more than save Terra. We may have sparked something greater. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. In the Imperial flagship preparing to depart Terra's solar system, Grand Admiral Thorne received a troubling report from his intelligence officer. Sir, we've detected unauthorized communications between several of our recently conquered territories. They appear to be discussing the Terran situation. Thorne frowned. Content. Mostly speculative, sir, but concerning. Phrases like if Terra could resist, and perhaps we too could negotiate better terms. The Admiral nodded slowly, understanding the implications. Monitor these communications closely, but take no action yet. I want to know how far this spreads. After the officer departed, Thorne returned to the viewport, gazing at the blue-green world now receding in the distance. The Terrans had achieved something remarkable, not just resisting Imperial might, but forcing a diplomatic solution through sheer tenacity and ingenuity. You mean that wasn't their full army? The question had circulated among Imperial officers during the most intense fighting, a disbelieving whisper that revealed their fundamental miscalculation. They had expected a conventional military response to invasion, and instead found an entire planet willing to fight in ways they never anticipated. As the flagship accelerated away from Terra, Thorne wondered what the Empire might learn from this unexpected encounter, and what changes it might force upon a galactic power unaccustomed to compromise. Perhaps this small, blue world had changed not just its own fate, but the course of Imperial history itself. On Terra, as news of the Imperial fleet's departure spread, people emerged from shelters and strongholds to begin rebuilding. The sky still held threats, but also new possibilities. Humanity had faced extinction and instead found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or subjects, but as survivors who refused to surrender their future to anyone. They had earned their right to exist on their own terms, and the galaxy would never be the same.